Hi, this is Andrew. Today I wanted to talk to you again about China's financing of developing countries. The question you might ask is why Nehemiah Reset is concerned about China's financing of developing countries. Well, the short version is that China is engaged in suppressing its own citizens, but in the last several of years, it has been engaged in financing activities that ultimately have enabled it to suppress other countries as well, including the United States. This video is the third in a series of videos about China's financing techniques and their impact on foreign countries and how it is being used by China to gain control over key resources in various countries including electrical grids, dams, and natural resources. In this video, we will be discussing the new financing technique that China is implementing because of the negative perception of the Angola model that China has used in the past. For the past 2 or 3 years, Chinese think tanks and policymakers have been working on a new financing model that would address the problems that bedeviled the Angola model. Now, for the first time, we're starting to see the broad outlines of what this new formula looks like. Although there's been no official pronouncement by the government on any change in their approach to resource and infrastructure financing in Africa, some scholars have started to call the new method the China-Africa swap. The swap formula was introduced to permit African leaders to leverage their resource wealth as collateral to access credit at a manageable interest rate as well as a viable reimbursement option. The formula frees both China and African nations from higher transaction costs of having to do conversions into dollars. In a December 2019 column written by Dr. Iyazwale Michael, Executive Director of the Center for Nigerian Studies at the Institute of African Studies at Zhejiang Normal University, explained that the new swap formula marks a radical departure from the Angola model by incorporating more private investors and spreading the risk so both the Chinese creditor and African borrower both effectively have a financial stake in the deal. It involves a package in which a government grants a resource development production license to a private investor, and the government receives funding for infrastructure connected to the resources. The first question one asks is, how are these swaps different than the traditional resource for infrastructure deals, or the so-called Angola model? The swap formula provides loans in advance for African nations' development projects at a completely fixed price for the settled supply of resources. Basically, the swap formula is something of a fixed interest rate pact, the risk being on whether the agreed price of the resources soars or declines against the benchmark. The formula removes this uncertainty for African borrowing nations and provides a shift around the loan and price volatility risks in the process. It can be said that the formula is a type of novel fixed interest rate development loan, the kind where payment is in the form of a fixed price commodity. With that said, the swap formula acts as an effective agent of restraint on the part of the African government and mitigates the threat of corruption. Based on this, the formula permits African governments to invest in public works nowadays, paying for them with future exports. So a second question we hear is, what problem is this new financing model trying to solve? In spite of being extensively acknowledged as a connectivity and infrastructure development scheme for 7 years now, the Belt and Road Initiative or Angola model has come in for finger-pointing by some, with a few even calling the initiative a debt trap that could lead to debt distress for some African borrower nations. As such, in order to solve this problem, the swap formula was introduced to permit African leaders to leverage their resource wealth as option. The formula frees both China and African nations from higher transaction costs of having to do conversions into dollars. On top of that, it helps to lessen a lender's risk in African nations without good credit ratings as well as recognizes the context of recipient nations and prioritizes reimbursement rather than generating external debt distress. The formula demonstrates a vast shift away from megaloans and towards a direct swap formula. As for Beijing, the formula offers a solution to vital resources and a workaround to finger-pointing of China's debt trap issues. As for African nations, the formula offers a solution for a loan-free means and an avenue to transform the continent's natural resources advantage into a development advantage. In this way, the continent would not be looked into dependence on the production of raw material alone. Although this new method solves part of the problem that developing nations experienced with the Angola model, it still potentially allows China to gain control over scarce resources in various parts of the world with funds provided by the negative trade deficit of the United States and other countries. Again, you should ask, why is this so important and who is behind this plan? First, you need to understand why China is electing to finance these projects. China, like many countries, is looking for more natural resources, especially those that are in short supply in their country or are important from a strategic standpoint. A recent example of this occurred with Russia. In 2015, Russia purchased 20% of the United States uranium supply. At the time there were allegations that the Clinton Foundation received compensation for the sale to Russia. Why would the United States sell this rare resource to Russia? Whether the Clinton Foundation received compensation still has not been proven. But the result of the sale is not in question. Russia now owns 20% of the United States' uranium supply. A strategic win for Russia and a giant loss for the United States. Many of the projects that China is financing are being paid with natural resources. Most of these resources are or will be needed by China in the coming years. What isn't discussed much is that China is doing this with funds provided by the United States and other countries. These funds have been paid to China through our trade deficits. So how did this happen? It started when our leaders decided to encourage outsourcing of our manufacturing to China. Over the years this has transferred billions of dollars to China. They have used these funds to build their own infrastructure and use it on their Belt and Road initiatives. China provided goods at lower prices and took these funds and built much of its internal infrastructure. With the balance of the funds, they assisted other countries by building infrastructure projects in their country. China was paid for these projects by scarce resources like oil, mining resources, and more. Was building up China in this way planned by our leaders? While China was being built up, the United States was being torn down. At the same time, China has helped a number of our leaders to increase their personal bank accounts. To learn more about China's financing and its long-term strategic plan to secure natural resources, visit Nehemiah Reset's website at nehemiahreset.org. Over the last decade, China has used its Belt and Road financing to secure a supply of scarce resources for its economy. Also, learn how China has used its Belt and Road initiative to secure ownership of dams, electrical grids, and roadways by visiting our website at nehemiahreset.org. Thanks for taking the time to learn more about this aspect of China's long-term plans and how it may eventually impact our freedoms.